Hey traders, it's John Fortune here of this week's Weekly Forex Forecast. We're going to run through over 30 markets as we always do, highlighting targets in each market for the week ahead. And as we go through the markets this morning, we're going to be building out a high probability watch list along the way for next week. Last week was a great week. Out of 12 of the markets I highlighted for you all, 9 of them went to their targets, and one of the 3 that didn't, CAD yen, almost took out their target. So if you were long CAD yen last week, you would have made money on that as well. Going into this week and starting with the dollar index as we always do, the dollar index is structured to the upside. I have been bullish on this for a while now, and last week we did have a nice rally to the upside. We stopped just short of the target and we started to correct. So although we closed higher last week in the DXY, we did start to get this correction. This correction here is simply being viewed as another opportunity to look for further advances in the DXY up towards the target set from last week at 93.51. And what this means is I go into next week with, once again, a bullish bias on the dollar, meaning that I favor dollar strength trades in the dollar pairs next week. Next is crude oil. Now, crude oil last week didn't really go anywhere. It just corrected sideways. I am still bearish on this, and the analysis from last week remains the same. So any continued correction in this market would be viewed as an opportunity to look for bearish breakouts down towards the next key of support to the downside and the target set at the 56.44. This does not go on the high probability watch list for next week, but I do favor short positions in this market. Euro dollar. Last week euro dollar was on the high probability watch list to the downside, and we took out the target at the 1.1705 to the pip. That was the low of the week, so this was a brilliant market last week. Going into this week, it is on the high probability watch list once again. I do like this market to the downside. Any continued correction, as we're already seeing, is simply going to be viewed as another opportunity to look for bearish reversals and short positions in this market down to the next key of support to the downside and the target set at the 1.1613. Pound dollar. Now, pound dollar is structured to the upside, which of course is buying pounds, selling dollars. This is counter to what we looked at in the DXY, and it goes against my bullish bias in the dollar next week. As a result, I won't be trading this market next week. I'll be filtering it out. If you do really want to trade it, the opportunity I would be looking for is a pullback, and I'd be looking for a break higher towards the 1.40. That would be the opportunity I'm looking at, but I think there are better markets out there next week, and I'll be filtering this out myself. The main takeaway from this market is actually the strength of the pound, as opposed to any potential setup in this market next week. Dollar yen. Now, last week this was on the high probability watch list to the upside, and we had a really nice move taking out both targets to the upside and finishing right at the second target. Going into this week, it's back on the watch list. I do like this market. We have very strong momentum, and we have a strong dollar. Any continued correction, we're already starting to see a slight correction. Any continued correction is simply going to be viewed next week as an opportunity to look for bullish setups up towards the next key of resistance, the upside and the target set at the 111.62. Aussie dollar on the watch list this week as one to watch to the downside. We started to correct back towards the 0.76410. So this is an area now where I will be looking for potential bearish reversals in this market down towards the next key of support to the downside, the target set, the 0.7508. New Zealand dollar, one of the 3 markets last week on the watch list which didn't take out the targets. You can see I am still focused to the downside this week, and I was last week as well. What we had last week was just a continued correction. This is just a continued correction for the next leg down by the looks of it, and I do still favor this to the downside going into this week. So any continued correction is simply going to be viewed once again as another opportunity to look for bearish reversals and bearish setups in this market down to the next key of support to the downside and the target from last week, 0.6915. US dollar franc. Last week we had a really nice move to the upside. We had this on the watch list for a high probability move to the upside, and we took out the target at the 0.9426, and we finished the week right at that target. Going into this week, any correction in this market is simply viewed once again as another opportunity to look for bullish reversals up towards the next key of resistance, the upside and the target set at the 0.9530. Dollar CAD, not on the watch list last week and not on the watch list this week because of the strength of the US dollar index. I think for that reason there are better markets to trade next week. However, if you are looking to trade this market, the opportunity would be for any correction towards the 1.2660. That would be viewed as the opportunity to start to look for bearish setups into the 1.2363. Next is gold. Now, last week this was not on the watch list, and we had a big sell-off to the downside. Going into this week, especially with my bullish bias on the dollar, I am looking further declines in this market, so this does go on the watch list. We had a really sharp pullback. However, I am just viewing this as a pullback. So any bearish reversals in this area, in this market, would be viewed next week as the opportunity to start to look for short positions. Down towards the next key of support to the downside, the target set at the 1671.18. So next week, in terms of the dollar pairs, I do favour US dollar yen, US dollar Swiss franc to the upside, Euro dollar, New Zealand dollar, Aussie dollar and gold to the downside. Euro yen, not on the watch list last week and again not on the watch list this week. If you are looking to trade this market, this correction would be viewed as the opportunity to start to look for a breakdown, a reversal, and any breakout to the downside would be viewed as the opportunity to look for shorts down to the 128.47. Franc yen, last week I highlighted the 117.673 as a key area of resistance, and the high of this correction was the 117.763 to the pip head. We started to sell off from here. Going into next week, I do favour short positions in this market, but it does not go down on the high probability watch list. It is not one of my favourite markets for next week. I think there are better markets to trade. If you are looking to trade this, any breakout to the downside would be viewed as the opportunity to look for shorts down to the 115.65. Pound yen on the watch list this week as one to watch to the upside. We are approaching the 153.82, so what I would really like to see is any correction in this market next week is going to provide a great opportunity to start to look for bullish setups and bullish entries into this market up towards the next key of resistance, the upside, the target set for next week at the 153.82. Aussie yen doesn't make the watch list this week, but I do favour short positions to the downside if you are looking to trade this market. We've already started to correct. I'm looking at this just as a current bear flag, so any break to the downside in this market would be viewed as the opportunity to start to look for bearish setups and bearish entries down to the 82.10. CAD yen, we looked at this at the beginning of the video. This was a high probability move to the upside from last week. It was on the watch list. We stopped just short of the target. It was one of the three that didn't take out the target. The majority of this move took place last week. If you were not involved from last week, I am still looking for it to take out the 88.47. It is on the watch list once again. So any correction for anybody not involved from last week would be needed in order to start to get good risk to reward back towards the target. And any correction would be viewed as an opportunity to look for long positions once again up towards the 88.47, and if we can break through here up to the second target to the upside at the 89.14. New Zealand yen, not on the watch list next week as one of the best opportunities, but I do favour short positions in this market. So if you are looking to trade this market, what I'd be looking for is any reversal lower in this market would be viewed as the opportunity to look for short positions down to the 75.57. Euro franc, this was a market we took off the high probability watch list just as it started to get choppy, and we've saved ourselves a lot of headache because of that. As a result, it's not on the high probability watch list next week, but I am bullish in this market. Any correction, if you are looking to trade this, would be viewed as the opportunity to look for bullish reversals up towards the 1.1148. Euro New Zealand, this market structured to the upside. It's not on the high probability watch list, but it does look like we have a 1, sideways 2, 3, and then we're in a fourth wave correction. So I see high highs in this market, and I'm looking at the 1.71040. Any bullish reversal, therefore, in this market would be viewed as the opportunity to look for long positions up towards the next key of resistance, the upside, and the target set at the 1.7104. Euro Aussie, I am bullish on this market, but I think there are better markets out there. It doesn't go on the high probability watch list for next week. Last week's video, we were looking for a pullback into the 1.53690 before further advances towards the 1.5611. We have started to get this, so for anybody not involved, it would simply be viewed as another opportunity to look for bullish reversals up towards the next key of resistance, the upside at the 1.5611. Euro pound, have been short in the forecast all year on this market, and it has paid us handsomely throughout the year. It goes back on the watch list to the downside next week. I do like this for potential short positions. We're coming quite close to the 0.8488, so to get good risk to reward, as always, I would like to correct first before taking out this target, and that would give us the opportunity to look for short positions down to the 0.8488, and if we can break through here, be looking down towards the next key of support to the downside, target 2 at the 0.8417. EurCAD, this has been one of my favorite pairs over the last month to the downside, as you guys know, and it has paid very nicely. We've been taking out target after target, and last week we did take out the 1.4772 once again, and that was pretty much where the market finished last week. Going into this week, it's still on the watch list to the downside. I do favor short positions in this market once again. We started to correct, and any deeper correction would be welcome in order to look for another opportunity to go short in this market down towards the next care of support to the downside and the target set at the 1.4686. Pound franc on the watch list last week as a high probability move to the upside, and we did take out the target set at the 1.3015, and that was pretty much almost to the pip where we finished the week. Going into this week, I do still favor long positions. It is on the watch list once again. Any correction in this market would be viewed as another opportunity to look for bullish setups up towards the next key of resistance, the upside, the target set at the 1.3093. Pound Aussie on the high probability watch list last week for a move to the upside. We did have a really nice rally into the target at the 1.8215. Going into this week, it's back on the high probability watch list. I do like this market for further advances to the upside. We've already started to correct, and any deeper correction would simply be viewed once again as another opportunity to look for bullish entries in this market up towards the next key of resistance, the upside, the target set at the 1.8326. Pound CAD, I am bullish on this market, but it is not on the high probability watch list. I think there are better markets out there. If you are looking to trade this, any correction in this market towards the 1.7252 would be viewed as the opportunity to look for bullish setups into the 1.7476. Pound New Zealand, I highlighted this market as one to watch to the upside last week, and we took out the target at the 1.9798 to the pip almost. This was a really nice move last week. Going into this week, it is on the high probability watch list once again. I do favor long positions in this market. Any deeper correction, we've already started to correct somewhat, but any deeper correction will be viewed next week as another opportunity to look for bullish entries in this market up towards the next key of resistance, the upside, the target set at the 1.9922. Aussie franc, in last week's video we were looking for a pullback and a move down towards the 0.6990. Not much has happened. I do still favor short positions down into the 0.6990. It's not on the high probability watch list. I think there are better markets. For anybody not already involved, any continued correction, if you are looking to trade this market, would be viewed simply as another opportunity to look for bearish reversals down to the target set from last week, the 0.6990. Aussie CAD, highlighted as one to watch to the downside last week. I did note in last week's video that I did like the setup in this market, and we did take out the target at the 0.9523. There were a couple of people saying in the comment section they were looking to trade this, so well done if you did trade this last week. Going into this week, it is on the high probability watch list once again. I do favor short positions in this market again this week. We've already started to correct, which is great, so any continued correction is simply viewed as another opportunity to look for bearish entries in this market down to the next key of support to the downside and the target set, the 0.9459. Aussie New Zealand still doesn't make the high probability watch list this week. I think there are better markets out there to trade. If you are looking to trade this, I'd be viewing this correction as an opportunity to start to look for bullish breakouts since Aussie New Zealand is structured to the upside. And any breakout to the upside would be viewed, if you are looking to trade this, as the opportunity to look for long positions into the 1.0980. New Zealand CAD, along with CAD Yen, which almost took out the target, and New Zealand Dollar, this was the third market on the watch list last week that didn't make its target. And you can see quite clearly, it just hasn't really moved. Not much has changed since last week. I still favor short positions to the downside, and this is on the watch list again this week. Any continued correction is just viewed as an opportunity to look once again for bearish entries in this market down to the next key of support to the downside and the target set at the 0.8699. New Zealand franc, in last week's video, looking for a pullback towards the 0.66490 before further declines into the 0.6503. We started to pull back. It still doesn't make the watch list as one of the best opportunities, but this pullback is now viewed for anybody looking to trade this market as the opportunity to start to look for bearish reversals down to the next key of support to the downside, the target set, the 0.6503. And last but of course never least, CAD franc. Last week we were looking for further advances to the upside. This was down as a high probability move to the upside, and we took out the target at the 0.7503. And that was pretty much the move for last week in this market. Going into this week, it's back on the high probability watch list, and I do like long positions in this market next week. Any corrections we're getting now is simply viewed as another opportunity to look for bullish entries and bullish reversals in this market up towards the next key resistance to the upside and the target set at the 0.7568. So that is it for me for this week, guys. That is the watch list that I'll be looking at going into next week. Those are my favorite pairs for next week. As always, I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please let me know by liking, sharing, and subscribing. A big thank you to everybody who does that on a regular basis, and a big thank you to everybody who has subscribed to the channel so far, and also everybody who comments on the channel on a regular basis as well. I want to wish you all a nice weekend. I want to wish you all the best in your trading next week. The only thing left to say is take care, and don't forget to trade safely.